Hi everybody, this is Peter Wilson from Grace Waves Devotional, coming to you from Manchester in the UK, and we're looking at this series, Grace Conquers Depression. Today is part 14, it's getting longer and longer, and we're going to look at boundaries in forgiveness today. Boundaries in forgiveness, an area that has caused much pain when it comes to the place of forgiveness in talking about depression, is the ignorance of the place of boundaries in our lives. And I would say that in Christian relationships and Christian family relationships and marriage, overwhelmingly they are soured because we do not know how to set boundaries in our lives to protect ourselves. As a result, we trip up over the same problems again and again and again, and it leads to strife, anger, fear, bitterness, division, etc. A cocktail that quickly leads to depression. But those things need never have gotten to the place of strife in relationships in the first place. If we had put a boundary in place to protect ourselves, none of that would have happened. Proverbs 26:11, as a dog returns to its own vomit, so a fool repeats their folly. You know, there's a difference between ignorance and foolishness. There's nothing wrong with being ignorant. It simply means you do not know. But when somebody explains a thing to you so that you now know it, but carry on doing what you did before, you're no longer ignorant, you're a fool. And you know, a lot of us are foolish when it comes to our behavior because we resist having to change and grow up and mature. I've mentored and counselled a lot of believers over the years, and the number one issue above all others that they know nothing about is how to set boundaries in their lives. Why is that? There are two reasons. Number one, we all come from dysfunctional families, and where there is dysfunction, there is a lack of boundaries. Number two, no one has ever taught us about boundaries. Our parents didn't teach us because they didn't know about boundaries. So let's look at boundaries then. What are boundaries? First of all, we need to know as a believer that boundaries are biblical. The principle of boundaries has not come out of a counselling manual or the self-help movement. No, they have come from the Bible. And knowing that boundaries originated from the Bible gives us the confidence, strength and power to set boundaries in our lives. Let's look at some examples. Let's look at boundaries under the Old Covenant, and this is just one of many examples. Genesis 1:9 and 10, then God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. What was God doing here? The whole earth was covered with water, so he separated the waters out so that dry land could appear. And when that dry land appeared, God put a boundary in place so that that water could not flood the land again. Job 38 verses 8 to 11. God said, who shut in the sea with doors when it burst forth and issued from the womb? Here it is. When I fixed my boundary for it, and when I said, this far you may come, but no further, and here your proud waves must stop. Have you heard that expression? Oh, he drew a line in the sand. Where do you think it comes from? The Bible. When God drew a line in the sand and said to the sea, you cannot cross that line. You cannot flood the dry land again. Now we know that when there are typhoons and stuff like that, it overrides that boundary. But normally, the tide comes in and it stops at a particular place. And that God set that boundary at creation. Think about that. That's incredible. You look at the tide coming in and it stops. That's where God said, this far and no further. Incredible. Psalm 104:9 backs this up. It's Moses, I think it's Moses says, you have set a boundary that they may not pass over, that they may not return to cover the earth. Now let's look at boundaries in the life of Jesus in the Gospels. Mark 8:31-33. Jesus began to teach his disciples that the Son of Man must suffer and be rejected by the elders, chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He spoke this word openly. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But Jesus rebuked Peter, saying, get behind me, Satan, for you are not mindful of the things of God, but the things of men. What was happening here? Jesus was telling his disciples he had to go up to Jerusalem to be crucified, but Peter, acting out of his natural instincts, began to rebuke Jesus. And what did Jesus do? He got in Peter's face very hard and rebuked him and said, get behind me, Satan. He put a boundary in place to protect himself. Why? Had he surrendered to Peter's big rant, it would have thrown Jesus off and he wouldn't have gone to the cross. Can you see how important that was? So Peter was hard on Jesus. Jesus came back equally hard. Step back, mister. I am going up to Jerusalem. Can you see that? Let's now look at a boundary in the epistles, Galatians 2:11-13. When Peter had come to Antioch, I withstood him to his face, because he was to be blamed. For before certain men came from James, that was James, the church in Jerusalem. Before certain men came from James, he would eat with the Gentiles. But when they came, he withdrew and separated himself. Here it is, fearing those who were of the circumcision. The rest of the Jews also played the hypocrite with him, so that even Barnabas was carried away with their hypocrisy. See, Peter knew that the gospel of grace did not include law. But there were a group of people in the Jerusalem church who were called Judaizers, who believed that the gospel was a mixture of law and grace. So they began to dominate the churches with that message, and they came to the church in Galatia that Paul had planted, and Peter was there. And instead of Peter standing up to them because he knew it was wrong doctrine, he collapsed under fear and he went along with them. What did Paul do? He put a boundary in place. He got in Peter's face and told him straight that he was a hypocrite and he was doing it out of fear. What did Paul do? Paul prevented the whole future church from succumbing to that mixed law grace gospel. In fact, most of the church today is a Judaizing church, a mixture of law and grace. But thank God, the true grace gospel is arising around the world today. See, Peter allowed fear to prevent him from setting a boundary. And you see, boundaries can be mild boundaries, but they can be very strong boundaries as well. So we ask the question, what is a boundary? A boundary has a twofold application. Firstly, a boundary is put in place to protect ourselves from other people and circumstances. We saw this with Jesus when Peter tried to divert Jesus from the will of God in going up to Jerusalem to be crucified. Jesus put a boundary in place. He got in Peter's face and he made Peter step back. See, what was he doing? Jesus was protecting himself from Peter's control and domination and saying to him, step back, mister, I am going up to Jerusalem. Secondly, a boundary is put in place to force the other person to take responsibility for their dysfunctional behavior. So we just saw it with Paul, where he confronted Peter because Peter surrendered to the Judaizers out of fear and became a hypocrite. So Paul forced Peter to look at the truth, and Peter had to change, and Peter did change. He did change. Not everybody does that, but nonetheless, a boundary is it's to force the other person to take responsibility for their dysfunctional behavior. A lot of people do not like that. So let's look at some examples of boundaries in everyday life. You're invited to a cheese and wine evening, but you don't want to go because you find the host to be proud, arrogant, and his speech belittles people and embarrasses and shames them in front of others. So as a believer, you are perfectly entitled not to go to this wine and cheese evening. So you put a boundary in place to protect yourself. How do you do that? You pick up the phone, you phone Bill, who's the host for the evening. Hi, Bill. Thanks for your invitation to your cheese and wine party. However, I apologise. I am already booked for something else on that night. So Bill says, oh, well, never mind. And you finish by saying, hope you have a great cheese and wine event. You see, what is it that you are booked for on that night that means you can't go to the cheese and wine evening? It's because, number one, you don't want to go, and instead you're going to watch TV or read a book or go to the gym. You are not telling lies when you say something else has cropped up, because you have the right to choose what you want to do. And you do not owe Bill an explanation for why you can't go to his wine and cheese evening. Don't say I can't come because my mother is ill or the kids have a school evening on that night. No, that's being weak-willed and a coward because you don't want to upset Bill. No, you tell him the truth. Bill, I can't come. Something else has cropped up. And if Bill tries to ask you why you can't come, you stick to your original reply, which is, as I mentioned, Bill, something else has cropped up that I need to attend to. See, it's none of Bill's business why you can't come to his wine and cheese evening. And you repeating to Bill, as I said, Bill, something else has cropped up. You are sending out signals to Bill that says, Bill, keep your nose out of my business. Most people get that the first time. But if they don't, and they ask again a second, you increase your strength behind the words that you say. It's got nothing to do with Bill. I hope you're catching this, folks. So let me repeat. You do not owe Bill a reason for why you can't go. And you don't need to feel condemned or guilty that you don't want to go to Bill's cheese and wine evening. You are a free will person responsible for yourself. You have the right to say yes and the right to say no. And you don't have to give an explanation. See, we only do that out of fear. We do it because we're weak-willed and we're cowardly. That should be a signal to you and I. Something's got to change in our character if we're going to grow in Christ. Let's look at a different kind of boundary. Let's say in church you have an altercation with a person and that person says to you, you're an idiot. You need to wake up. Can I tell you, what's that doing? He's using words that are not addressing the altercation, but are attacking your character. You're an idiot. See, there's a difference between addressing a situation and attacking a person's character. Let me give you an example. And this is a principle that parents are to use with their children when they are disciplining and training their children. So we come to the dining table, and young Billy, who's 10, he knocks over a glass of milk. It was an accident. Following night he does the same, and the following night he does the same. Why does he do that? Because kids are like that, aren't they? They get into these daft ways of thinking and behaving. So on the third evening, he knocks the glass over, and his father says, "Billy, you are an idiot. You are a selfish brat. Get up to your room. I'll be up there in 10 minutes." See, what's Billy's dad done? He's not addressed the situation. He's attacked his son's character. He's hurt and wounded his son by the names that he's called him. And you know that is very hard to undo. The only way to undo it is for Billy's dad to realise what he's done and ask his son to forgive him. Whereas the right way is on the third night when Billy knocks over the glass of milk, say, "Billy, what you've done there is wrong. Go up to your room and I'll be up there in 10 minutes. So you go up to the room, Billy's there. First of all, you have to bring Billy to the place where he takes responsibility for his dysfunctional behaviour. So it's, "Billy, what did you just do?" "Well, you know, Dad, this happened." "No, what did you just do, Billy?" "I knocked a glass of milk over." "Was it right or was it wrong, Billy?" "It was wrong, Dad." See? Your behaviour, Billy, was idiotic and brattish behaviour. See the difference here? He's calling Billy's behaviour idiotic and brattish. He's not attacking Billy's character. Can you see this? So he can say that to Billy, "Your behaviour was like this," because that is not attacking his character. It's addressing his behaviour. So that then Billy has to take the discipline, whatever that may be. "Right, Billy, for the next 2 weeks, we're taking a £2 out of the money you get for your paper round to pay for the milk that you spilled and the damage that you did to the table. Do you understand me, Billy?" "Yes, I do, Dad." "Now come here. I love you." Can you see the difference? And if you look around in society today, most people are not addressing situations. They are attacking other people's characters. So if you say anything about the feminist movement, you're a sexist. You're a white supremacist. Can you see? It's an attack on the character. If you say anything about the trans thing that's going on at the moment of women becoming men and men becoming women, you're a hater. See, all these words that are used to make you back away. But what are they doing? They are attacking your character. And it's called ad hominem debate. Ad hominem is a Latin phrase. It means to the man or to the woman. And it's a form of debate that is used to win an argument by attacking the person's character rather than addressing the issue at hand. You see it all the time, especially in America. It's what they do with Donald Trump. They use ad hominem attacks against him. And when you realise the difference between the two things, it enables you to adjust your behaviour to it, so that when you speak to another person who's behaving like an idiot, you don't say, "Bill, you're an idiot." You say, "Bill, your behaviour is idiotic." Because you're not attacking Bill's character, you're addressing his behaviour. And there's a difference. Attacking his character will wound and hurt him. Addressing his behaviour will make him sit up and realise where he's been going wrong. I want to tell you folks, a lot of us have allowed other people to attack our characters because we didn't know how to respond, and we ended up hurt and we didn't know why. Well, you know now you know why. and you can change your behavior. I had a situation not long ago in the church where somebody called me a name, and immediately I said to them, do not call me that name. They didn't like it, but I said, do not call me that name. You didn't need to call me that. Do not call me that again. And they backed off. See, why? Because I know the difference between addressing the situation at hand and attacking my character. Let's now look at a boundary you can put in for forgiveness. You've had an altercation with somebody at church. You said the wrong thing. They said the wrong thing. You have to resolve it. So you apologise for your part in the altercation, but the other person doesn't do it. But that's between them and God. You've done your bit, but you go home and now you've got to forgive that person. And so you need time to work through your forgiveness. And you realise that when you see the face of that other person, you just can't stomach them. It makes you feel sick. See, you have the right not to relate to that person again. You have the right to put a boundary in and say, let's say he's called John. You go to see him, you say, John, we had that altercation last week, and I just want to say I need a time apart to heal from that. I was hurt in that situation. And I'm just saying that I'm going to have a time apart from our relationship to heal. Now, he can either receive it or not. It doesn't really matter. You are entitled to say that to them so that in future you'll let on to John, but you won't engage him in conversation. And what does that do? It frees you up and it takes the pressure off you, and it gives you time to work through your forgiveness. Can you see that? You don't have to work with John again. So, in the future, if it comes up, you're invited to join the worship team and John's on the worship team and you don't want to do it. You say, well, thanks for inviting me, but I've got other things on at the moment. So you're putting boundaries in to protect yourself. So important, especially when it comes to depression. Let me finish by telling you about a book which I believe every believer should have a copy. It's written by two Christian guys, the psychologists, counsellors, etc. It's called Boundaries: When to Say Yes, How to Say No. And it's by Henry Cloud and John Townsend. You can buy a copy for £9 from Amazon. And in fact, they've done a whole series of books: Boundaries in Marriage, Boundaries in Dating, Boundaries in Leadership. And they lay out in very simple words how to set boundaries, how to affirm boundaries, and how that works out in your everyday family relationships and work and church relationships. They are brilliant books, folks. And I would recommend anybody to get a copy. In my view, it's the best book on boundaries I've ever read. So there you go. Next week, we're going to look at how to set a boundary so that you can follow through on that, because most people are frightened of setting boundaries, especially in marriage. So we're going to look at how to do that and how to get the support you need, because you need at least one other person behind you when you need to set important boundaries in your life, so they can give you feedback, they can encourage you, they can pray for you, etc., etc., etc. So there we go, folks. Have a great day. See you next week. Bye-bye.